So far, that junkyard 4L80 is actually hanging in there pretty good. I've got a lot of timing pulled on the shifts, so it hopefully doesn't slip too badly, but when it does shift, it's pretty crisp, it's pretty quick, and, you know, I'm loving it. So far, this is a junkyard setup. Junkyard 8.1, junkyard 4L80. Not bad. Hey guys, welcome back. My name's LT, and the plan for today is to get Ugly Truck, the turbocharged and 8.1 swapped Silverado 1500, back out on the road, do a little bit more tuning, and this time do a full throttle, wide open pull under full boost, which is admittedly now only like 5 pounds of boost, but last time I took care of the fuel pump, so hopefully, fingers crossed, we won't have any more fuel pressure issues under wide open throttle. But before we get to that, there's 2 things that I need to take care of. First, there's a small problem that I need to take care of on the Ugly Truck, something that is not that big of a deal, but it kind of is. It's something that I want to do before I get the truck running under boost again. And the second thing, that's just a rant that I want to get off my chest. Now, to run a channel like this, obviously we're working on cars and trucks. Obviously, that takes parts to make that happen. And you know, I order a lot of parts, I get a lot of stuff shipped to the house, and for the most part, whenever you type in a part number or whenever you order something, you call and talk to somebody on the phone, you get what you ask for, and that's great. That's a perfect scenario, but occasionally, every now and again, like what happened to me this morning, you receive something that is totally not what you asked for. Now, there's a part behind me, and I'll show you in just a second what it is. I ordered it for one of my project trucks. I'm not going to tell you which one just yet. But it is totally wrong. It's not what I asked for, it's not what I wanted, and it's really not something that I'm even going to use. So here it is. This obviously is an axle assembly, and what this particular one is, again, not what I ordered, this is a Dana 60 Super. It was found under like Chevy Express 2500 or 3500 one-ton vans. So it's a big heavy-duty axle, it's really wide. It's a semi-floater, I'll kind of let that be a clue to you, but it's a semi-floating axle. This particular one has 411 gears in it, which is good. It has a limited slip, which is also pretty good, but it's a semi-floater and it's a 9 3/4 inch ring gear. Again, totally not what I ordered. I mean, it's probably a good axle for whatever it is, but I just can't use it. I'm not going to use it, so I'm dealing with the shipping company. I'm dealing with the company that I bought it from. It's I'm not going to say who it is, but it's one of those big national junkyard chains. You may know exactly who I'm talking about. But anyway, I'm going to have to deal with that. It's frustrating because I wanted to install that axle pretty quickly here, but that's all right. I guess it's part of the game when you're ordering parts. It's frustrating to have to deal with. So anyway, rant over. Time to work. If you paid attention during the first turbo test drive video, you might have noticed in the shot that was looking kind of over my shoulder out the back window, whenever I let off the gas pretty rapidly, there's a pretty big puff of blue smoke that comes out the tailpipe. Yeah, it does smoke a little on decel though, so I'll have to figure that out. And that's really never something that you want to see, but I quickly realized what the problem was because I knew it was something that I hadn't taken care of yet. So on these 8.1s, there's not a traditional PCV system. It does have a crankcase ventilation system, and it basically consists of just a small tube that's about 1/16 of an inch in diameter that's just sticking out in the bottom of the lifter valley, and it just sucks any crankcase vapors that are in there straight into the intake. There's no check valve, there's nothing to prevent vapor from being, or oil from being separated from the gases in there. And so that's kind of one of the reasons why these 8.1s are known to have an oil consumption problem, because it's sucking crankcase vapor directly into the plenum, and there's nothing to separate the oil from the vapor. So anyway, along those same lines, there's also nothing to prevent boost pressure, positive boost pressure, from being forced into the crankcase. And that's really not something that you want to have, because it can, you know, it can blow out a gasket, it can blow out a rear main seal, and it can cause all kinds of problems down the road. So we're just going to take care of, or we're going to take care of part of the problem, because this is not going to be a permanent solution. I've actually got to pull the intake to do that. But just to get the truck finished tuning, I'm going to kind of fix half the problem. And it'll at least, I think, again, got my fingers crossed, I think it'll remedy the situation. So here's the deal. The 8.1s, in order to get fresh air into the crankcase to replace what gets sucked out through the intake, it has to let fresh air in somewhere, and it's not external, it's kind of through the back of the throttle body. Now, the throttle body is removed from the truck, and there's 3 ports in the intake. One, this main port right here, that's where the air gets sucked into the engine. this kind of groove right here that's connected to the main area, that's where the idle air control motor kind of lets the air around the throttle body. And then you've got this guy right here. This port is where the fresh air gets sucked down into the crankcase. It's kind of, you can see the casting down along the side there. It kind of follows and goes into the similar area that the oil fill tube goes into, straight under the intake into the plenum, or into the lifter valley, I should say. Now, I do have a different throttle body on this truck. It's actually the stock 5.3 throttle body, and that's actually going to help me out. So on the 8.1 throttle bodies, it's actually going to look very similar to this. There's a port kind of right there where I have my thumb. You kind of see it goes straight through, and that is where the fresh air goes, or that's how the fresh air is allowed to get into the bottom of the crankcase through this port right here. Now, on an 8.1, they don't have this little port off to the side. That's blocked off. It's not drilled out, but again, that port just goes straight through. Luckily, this 5.3 throttle body has this little barbed fitting right here that also allows air. You can maybe kind of see it right there. It allows air to get down into that same cavity. Now, before I just had this thing blocked off when I was running naturally aspirated because it got its fresh air right through there. It was kind of filtered by the traditional air filter, and the mass airflow meter measured all the air that was going in. So anyway, I know this is getting a little bit lengthy, but my process, or what I'm going to do now, is I need to block that port off, because right now that's also another spot where positive boost pressure is being forced into the intake manifold. And so it's just like a balloon. There's nowhere for the air to go. That positive pressure just fills up the crankcase. And again, it could cause all kinds of problems. So I need to block off at least one of those, and this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to block off this port right here so we no longer have positive boost pressure being forced into the bottom of the intake. It'll still get forced in from the bottom of the PCV, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to block off kind of the bottom half of that, but still allow this port right here to be connected to the crankcase. That way, I can run a small hose on here out to some sort of either a breather or a catch can, which I have ordered a catch can. And that way, whenever I roll into boost, the pressure will still be feeding into the crankcase, but it's not going to be like a balloon anymore. It's just going to be kind of a pass-through. So at least that excess pressure will be allowed to get pushed out, so it's not just being held inside the engine. And hopefully that'll at least stop that big puff of blue smoke whenever I let off the throttle, because my theory is that crankcase gets pressurized, all the vapors just kind of get mixed up, and you close the throttle, then all of a sudden all that extra pressure gets sucked back into the intake. So we'll see if it works. I'm going to use some epoxy, but enough talking. I know this is a really long one. Let's get to work. I'm going to have to take care of the second part of the PCV modification a little bit later on, because that will require pulling the intake, and quite frankly I just don't want to do it right now. But basically it involves pulling out that little orifice tube and installing a pipe plug in its place, so positive boost pressure is no longer going to be allowed to escape from the plenum into the crankcase. Along the way, I'm going to have to modify the intake to accept like a traditional external PCV system. There's a couple spots in the back where I can drill and tap into the plenum to get vacuum, and then in through the intake back down into the valley. But along the way, I'm also going to install a check valve. That way boost pressure is no longer going to be allowed to escape the plenum into the crankcase. And then I'll also install a PCV, a catch can. That way any oil will be separated from vapors as it gets sucked from the crankcase back into the intake system. Now, the way that I've got it right now, when I'm running the truck under boost, yes, pressure will still come from the plenum into the crankcase, but now because I've modified the throttle body to block off the second place where boost pressure will enter the crankcase, now this port right here is just basically a fresh air port from the crankcase out to the atmosphere. So any pressure that is built up will just flow out a hose here, and I'll put it into a little, I'll rig up some kind of temporary catch can, at least just for now. But anyway, the JB Weld is supposed to dry for like 24 hours, I think, before I put it back on. I did get the slower curing stuff because it does have a little bit higher temperature threshold that it will operate in. This stuff, I guess, is like 550 degrees. Now, this is by no means a sponsored post by JB Weld or anything. It should be. Contact me, JB Weld, if you see this. But the really cool thing about their new setup is it's got one of these little mixing tips. Now, I've used these kind of like in the paint and body world with different types of epoxies and sealers, but it's really cool because the product will actually mix right there in the tip, because I was worried I'd have to just get the old, the two different tubes, you squirt them out on a piece of cardboard and then you stir it up. It would have been really difficult to get all the product down in the hole, but with that little mixing tip or whatever, it flowed really nicely down in there, and I'm really actually happy with how it looks, and I think it's going to function good too. I'm not worried actually about the plug coming out because the way that it's shaped, there's just physically no way for that solid chunk of JB Weld to actually escape the hole that it's in. So it's never going to fall out. It's never going to get sucked into the engine and chew up a valve or anything like that. So we're good to go. Now I just got to wait 24 hours for it to cure. So it's the next day and all the epoxy is cured, which means the throttle body can go back on the truck. And I'm pretty happy with how it turned out, actually, for never having done this before. The front side is nice and smooth, and the back side is almost as smooth. It's just a tiny bit rough where the tape just kind of held it from flowing out over to the edges. Now, all the epoxy here is just a little bit below the sealing surface, so there should be no problems with the leaks. You can kind of see the little popsicle stick I used down in there just to make a dam to separate the air path from the inlet there. And as long as the intake gasket does its job, this guy right here, it's got a little thin spot, but as long as this gasket does its job, we won't have boost pressure bleeding out into the crankcase. So we'll get the throttle body back on, and then I've got to install some sort of a catch can. And I have an actual catch can that's in the mail right now, but I want to get something temporarily rigged up to get me back on the road. And if I just put a hose on the end of that, it'll probably just spew vapor all over the engine bay. So I'm just going to rig something up with like a bottle, some Scotch-Brite, and a little bit of hose, just, basic stuff that I have laying around. All right, my DIY catch can is hooked up, everything's plumbed in, and this is the first time we're gonna be testing out the new fuel pump, and hopefully we don't see any big puffs of smoke as I let off the gas. So let's roll and boost quickly. I'm gonna watch a bunch of stuff and we'll go from there. Good fuel pressure, good fuel pressure. It's a little rich. No big puff out the tailgate, or tailpipe rather. I think we're good. Looked a tiny bit rich actually. I was just kind of glancing at the wideband. Fuel pressure was holding perfectly, 60 pounds, no drops there. So probably what I really need to do is, because that was really the first wide open throttle pull I did, just kind of easy roll on in third gear, is I'm gonna check out the data. I've got the laptop looked up, make sure we had nothing like, you know, crazy knock or anything like that. Make a few tweaks and go from there, do it again. Okay, so far so good. Just a teeny tiny bit of knock retard, 0.3 degrees. But at the time it looks like, I mean, it was running only 16 degrees of advance, so I'm not super worried about that right now, and it definitely was trending on the rich side. So we're going to save this log and take another one on the way back, and then I'll go make some corrections. This truck shakes awful on the brakes. These tires are garbage. You can hear all the plastic and stuff rattling around, but so far so good. Let's go read some data and make some corrections. All right, real quick, the DIY catch can, I'm going to declare that a success, or actually it's mostly due to the blocking off the port on the throttle body, not necessarily the catch can, but by allowing that pressure in the crankcase to at least escape and not become pressurized, we don't have that big puff of blue smoke whenever I let off the throttle. So I'm happy there, you know, and the best part is there's not a whole lot of vapor that's actually collecting in this line. You know, when it's idling, I can put my finger over the little hole there in the cap, and I can definitely tell it's pulling a vacuum. It is moving air through there, so it's doing what it should. And definitely under boost, there will be a little bit of air coming out. But like I said, it eliminated that big puff of blue smoke when I lifted off the throttle. So I'm happy for now. And in a future upload, I'll get to pulling the intake and plugging off the little PCV port or whatever they call it. And we'll fix that for good. But for now, it's a huge step in the right direction. Now, you guys have often asked me to do a little bit more content on tuning stuff and kind of go over some of the things that I'm looking for. So real quick, I'll show you kind of where we're at. And this is only specific to wide open throttle tuning, but there's two things that I'm paying attention to right now. Everything else I'm forgetting. I'm just paying attention to knock retard and fuel mixture. So this table right here, retard, this is RPM up top, air mass down on the side, and the average values out of all these pulls, if you look, this little red line is RPM. So I did one pull there, one pull there, one there, one there. So 5 wide open throttle pulls, and the average across all of those, it would only pull 0.1, 0.5, 0.4, 0.2 degrees of timing. Now, this is just an average across all data collected, and I kind of had to dive into this a little bit, and it actually pulled different amounts of timing on each run. Now, this is a cool feature I actually just found out about. You can click this guy right here, which only shows you the values down in this cursor thing right here. So let's start at the beginning. So on this wide open throttle pull right there, boom, pulled no time, well, 0.3 degrees, so not a huge amount. On this pull right here, 0. On this little pull here, we got a little bit more, 1 degree pulled. On this one, again, back to 0. And on this pull right here, boom, what's going on? We got 3 degrees that is pulling. Now there is something a little bit funky going on here because this just was right after a shift. This line right here, this is gear. So we went from second to third gear, which the shift happened right about there. And almost immediately after, we had a little bit of timing pulled. And I think it might have something to do with torque management. I'm not sure because I did gear shifts on the other pulls as well. But just think about this. Whenever you're looking at timing, take those numbers with a grain of salt because it could be several different things. Because even in this situation, let's see, right before it started to pull timing, I was only at 16 degrees of spark, which isn't all that much. I probably shouldn't be getting any sort of knock, you know, at that situation. Now, remember, I do have 91 octane in the fuel, but I also did just order some of that race gas concentrate stuff. So what I'm gonna do in the future, or probably in one of the next 2 uploads, I'm gonna mix up a batch of really high octane stuff, like, I don't know, 95, 97 or something like that. So I basically know, or I'm guaranteed that I shouldn't be pre-igniting that fuel mixture. And then what I'll do is you can actually go in and dial in the sensitivity of the knock sensors at certain RPMs. But I don't want to get into that right now until I know I'm actually not knocking. I think I'm pretty safe right now, but just in case, I did go into the spark table that is right over here. I went in the spark table, which is this guy right here, and I did pull a couple of degrees of spark down here on the bottom. Now, another note, you guys will probably notice if you're into tuning and stuff that we are running on the very bottom row of the spark table, and that's because I haven't scaled the spark just yet, and that's going to take a lot more work in the tune. And I'll probably have to get to that whenever I want to raise the boost. But for now, like I said, we're just running on the bottom row of the spark table. Okay, this is long-winded, but the second thing that I look for is the fuel correction. So we'll go back over to the data logger. We'll pull up air-fuel ratio error versus map right here. Okay, a lot of these values are going to be kind of all over the place. And right through the middle here, kind of the drivability sections, we've got a lot of values that are close to zero, -1, -1, you know, +4. That's not too bad. And then down here under boost, we got up to 125 kPa in this row here. These are all negative values. It's pulling fuel, so 2%, or it's not pulling fuel, but it's 2% rich, 4% rich, 5% rich. And I definitely would prefer it to be on the rich side as opposed to being on the lean side. But what I'm doing now is I'll take that information right there, and I can basically copy and paste this as a multiplication factor into the fuel table, or the VE table rather, which is right here, and just make those corrections. And I've already actually gone ahead and done it for this batch of data. But so what I've done now is just use that data, make corrections, and we'll go back out now that the tune's loaded up again, the new tune, and we'll do it all over again and see if we get a little bit closer to that target. Holy cow, that's a long one. 5 minutes. Now, tuning is one of those things where it's like you're never really done with it because there's so many different situations you've got to account for, whether that's wide open throttle, partial throttle, you know, the transient stuff, taking off from a dead stop, you know, going from cruise to wide open throttle. You got to make sure all those situations have been addressed and are properly dialed in. And I'm really happy with the headway that we're making, because when I first started this project, I was worried I was going to have to hire a tuner because I wouldn't be able to figure it out at all. Remember, I'm not a tuner. I haven't tuned that many cars, but it's just a matter of being persistent, you know, doing your research and making sure you know what you're doing. Not that I'm saying I know what I'm doing, but at least I know enough, or I'm lucky enough to get started in the right direction. So next time, I don't know about next upload, but soon I'm going to have to get this truck on the dyno and see how much power it actually is putting down, because that's kind of the question everybody wants to know. And other than that, I know I promised you guys a burnout, so let's see what we can do. All right, guys, third gear. Oh boy. Turbo Big Block, gotta love it. Hey guys, thanks for watching. I appreciate you, I honestly do. Stop by next time. You know what to do. Subscribe, like the video, all that good stuff. I'm gonna go drive some more. This is fun. Whoa! Hold on, truck. Getting a little squirrely.